I'm Becky Meagher, and welcome to Transitions, Body, Mind, Spirit. Transitions, we have so many different transitions in our life, and I like to use the metaphor of triathlon, something that I do. And in a triathlon, what happens? First you swim, and then you get to the transition area. And then you bike, and then you get a transition area. And then you run, and then you have a great time. Well, this is a great metaphor for life. And we have so many different things, so many directions we think we're going to go, and we have these little turns here and there. And today we have a very interesting guest, David Poronoff, who is Assistant Director of Larkspur. Larkspur is a natural burial place outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and something that I really think everyone needs to know about, because we never think about burials in a natural way. And David, thank you for being here. Tell us about Larkspur, and I'm probably saying that what is the proper name for it? Conservation something? Or?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So the organization is Larkspur Conservation. We're named for one of the ephemeral wildflowers that grows on our property here. It's a really beautiful, bright purple flower that comes back every spring. So Larkspur Conservation is a conservation burial ground, and that means a couple of things. So the first is that we are a cemetery or burial ground that only does natural burial. And so when I talk about natural burial or green burial, those terms are used interchangeably. I'm talking about three things. The first is that there's no embalming allowed. The second is that there are no vaults used in the cemetery. Those are typically either concrete or steel, sometimes other materials, boxes that are placed into the ground in the cemetery before somebody's casketed body is buried.
That's a traditional way, well, the traditional local.
We'll talk about the word traditional, but
yeah.
in a little bit, but it's something that has become a convention, yes.
Yeah, convention, right.
And the third piece of the puzzle is that everything used in the burial process has to be natural and biodegradable. So if there's a casket, and that's a big if, it's got to be a natural and biodegradable material, like wood. So think of a simple pine box, something that's woven, like wicker, willow, reed, seagrass, bamboo are all totally fine and acceptable for natural burial. But people can choose to be buried without a casket at all and just be wrapped in a natural cloth shroud, which again, as long as it's a natural fiber like cotton, linen, wool, muslin, or silk, are all totally fine for natural burial. So again, natural burial, no embalming, no vaults, everything's biodegradable and natural.
Very natural.
We take that idea of a natural burial or green burial and partner it with land conservation efforts. So for our case, our property is 112 acres that'll grow to about 200 acres over time, that we've partnered with the Nature Conservancy on.
Nature Conservancy, okay.
And so we have what's called a conservation easement on the property. It's a document that's similar to a title restriction or a deed restriction in that it moves with ownership of the property. But it's essentially a contract where the landowner gives up some of the rights to their land, namely development, subdivision, mining, things that would otherwise adversely affect the conservation value of the property. It'll also prescribe how the land is to be managed. And so every conservation easement is different, and ours with the Nature Conservancy is tailored specifically for what we do on the property being natural burial. So, when we talk about the place being conserved and protected, part of it is the conservation easement, but part of it is also the ethos with which we interact with the space, right? It's not just, well, we know nothing can happen here and so we're good. It's an active working relationship with the land, seeing what needs healing, what needs preserving, right? It's the conservation is not just preservation, but restoration also. And so when people choose to be buried at Larkspur, they're leaving a legacy of land conservation. Our preserve out in Sumner County is open to the public 365 days a year, rain or shine, as a public green space. People can go for hiking, birding,
Picnic?
picnics, mindful meditation. You know, any reason to be outside is a reason to go to Larkspur.
Wow, what an interesting concept. And we're going to go more into that, but I always like to know more about you and how you how your transition into this started in the first place. Did you grow up as a kid, what was that, in Tampa, Florida, I believe?
I did. I grew up in Tampa and went to the University of Florida in Gainesville for college, and kind of quickly found political science and really political theory as my interest. I loved reading and talking about these books and ideas with other students and teachers, but I grew, I don't know that disillusioned is the right word, but felt like I needed something more, which is when I sort of stumbled into the sustainability program at the university.
Okay. And then may I ask, when you decided you were going to have a political science degree, were you thinking, I'm going to work for a party or Democrats or Republicans or any of that? Was that political part of it?
No,
or social
no, it was much.
justice?
It was much more. It was what interested me, and less the, modern politics, and more that political philosophy. That these sort of old philosophers whose ideas we reference and whose societies we've built our lives around, they're often forgotten. And so when we talk about words like liberal, they have roots and they have meanings back hundreds of years. And so it was interesting for me to be able to go into that history and to have a better understanding of where we are today.
And so that was your aim, to get a degree in this. And then when you first started, what were you thinking you were going to do when you graduated?
I had fantasies for a really long time of being a professor. I loved the idea of being able to sit and work with students and talk about these books. I had a professor who said, the course is essentially you read about the book, you talk about the book, you write about the book. And that being sort of the foundational, frame for approaching one of these classes. And I really felt inspired when I was talking and interacting with people about these theories, philosophies, ways of approaching communal life.
And then you kind of had talked about felt you were a little bit at University of Florida, a little bit in the ivory tower, and somehow or other you got to be digging graves. Now, how did that even happen?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite stories to tell. I was taking an environmental ethics class.
Environmental ethics.
With someone who is now a very dear friend. He was a PhD student at the time, and shared an office with another PhD student whose class I was taking and doing research with. So I lived in their office for a large part of the day, and became friendly with him. And he had brought one of our local county commissioners to come to our class to speak about his work on the county commission. His name is Robert Hutchinson. Really, really wonderful person. And he talked to our class, and a friend and I stayed after the class to talk to the two of them, try and glean some kind of wisdom. And they were good friends, and so they were kind of talking back and forth, and this county commissioner, who went by Hutch, said to my professor, "Oh, are you coming to the grave digging later today?" And he shoots back, "Oh, I don't know, I've got this, that, and the other thing." And my friend and I kind of looked at each other and started slowly backing away, because we were a little bit afraid that the graves were for us. And they saw us and explained that a conservation cemetery, much like Larkspur, existed just outside of town.
So outside Gainesville, Florida, right?
In Gainesville, Florida, was also a nonprofit organization that relied on volunteers for a lot of their work. everything from office stuff to digging the graves to helping at burial ceremonies. It was really a community endeavor, and that they could use a couple extra hands to help dig this person's grave. And did we want to join? And we looked at each other again and said, sure, why not? So that day, it was a Wednesday, and a class that got out around 4:30 or 5, and I drove kind of through old country roads to where the cemetery was, and dug a stranger's grave with a good friend, a professor, a local county commissioner and politician, and a number of people who had been in the community for years and years. And I really just had a wonderful time. And I know that it's a strange thing to say about digging a grave, and I'll come back to that. But you know, I was the last person that day in the hole, squaring off the corners, leveling out the bottom. And I thought about it a little bit then, but it kind of scared me, and so I sort of pushed the thought away. But it kept coming back to me in the days and weeks afterward, that I had a connection of sorts to this person who I would never get to meet.
Did you know a name or anything?
Didn't know a name.
Female, male,
Nothing.
age, anything?
Nothing.
No. Okay.
Total stranger.
Okay.
So I had a connection to this person who I would never get to meet because she had passed. And to her friends and family, who I more than likely would never get to meet. And I didn't know how to process it. I didn't know what it was. But I knew very, very quickly that there was no active, the storytelling and jokes and, just community interaction that happened as we were digging the grave, that is interesting and fun and engaging as that activity was. There is no act of service quite like digging a grave for a stranger.
You looked at it as an act of service.
Absolutely.
Okay, wow.
And so I had an itch that I needed to scratch, and so I started volunteering. And volunteering turned into an internship, which turned into a part-time job while I was a student, doing kind of everything for the organization, from administrative work to working with families, to becoming a full-time job when I graduated.
Wow, and that wasn't political science, was it?
It wasn't, no.
Yeah.
But there was still lessons to be learned. Part of what caught my attention initially about the activity of grave digging, not just in that one moment, but in all the subsequent times that I did that activity, I got to witness local attorneys, artists, real estate agents, college and high school students, bakers, all kinds of people from different walks of life, coming together for an act of service, but also able to interact with a local elected official in a way that their access was unmediated. And they got to ask him about things that were happening in the community. And I got to see organizing around local politics happening as a grave was being dug.
Wow, just from the interaction of the volunteers around?
Yes, absolutely. And so part of what captivated my attention was the way that these volunteering opportunities were moments of community activism and organizing, engagement with each other. People who may not otherwise get to meet and hear each other's stories. And there's a lot of that, this work of hearing and absorbing people's stories. But it was a really special thing to be a part of.
Wow. And then somehow or other, you left Gainesville and are here in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah, that's right. I left Prairie Creek Conservation Cemetery in Gainesville last year and moved here to Nashville and started with Larkspur in September. Still actively work with the folks at Prairie Creek. You know, there are 9 conservation burial grounds in the country.
In the whole country, so
In the
there's
whole
only
country.
9 of these.
So that's right. So there are
The
certainly
whole
organizations who are doing natural burial and offering that as a choice, and that's a really wonderful thing. But of organizations like Larkspur who partner natural burial with land conservation, one of 9.
One of 9. Wow, wow. And you kind of multiply all the people that die across the country, and there's only 9 kinds of Larkspur-like places in the whole country. So you're kind of on the cutting edge of maybe the future. What is?
I hope so.
Yes.
You know, I think that, you know, natural burial has a whole lot of benefits for people and the planet, right? You know, it's less resource intensive. By and large, it's less expensive, and so there's a social justice component to it. You know, a lot of people go into poverty over funeral expenses. It can be really, really impactful to people. And so, you know, there's all those pieces, but when you can also provide green space to the community, clean air and clean water, a place for people to go and be in nature, and for your act of burial to be part of what sustains that place and protects not just that piece of land, but maybe more land in the future. That part of the model that we're espousing here is that there should be a positive feedback loop out of these places, that we're not just protecting the individual spaces that we're at right now, but that revenue from every burial can go to protect more land in the future.
Well, kind of walk us through, okay, let's say I have a loved one, and that loved one is said, you know, when I die, I want to be at Larkspur. Okay, so like, do they sign up, or is that loved one who maybe they can still walk, they haven't died yet, and they can go out and I like that tree, I want that. Is that how they do it? How do you like go out to all this acreage and go, that's the spot I want? And is there a headstone, or how do you know where?
All very good questions.
Yes.
All very good questions.
How does that work?
So people come to us at all stages. People in their 30s, 40s, 50s saying, I want to know what I need to do to have my ducks in a row. We have people that come to us saying, you know, I'm 80, I need to have a plan. I need my kids to know what I want, and I don't know what to do. Where do I go? And we work with families who either have a family member in hospice or have just had a loss and call us and say, what do we do? So, you know, people can absolutely plan ahead with us. That's a lot of the work that we do. You know, educating people, you know, whether or not they come to Larkspur is not as important to me. You know, there's a lot of different choices out there, and so I want people to know what the right thing is for them. Now, when people know what's out there and what their different choices mean, and they see the photos of the leaves changing, of the ephemeral wildflowers, of the stream that we have running through the property, of the butterflies and bees that come in the late summer with all the warm season grasses and flowers, and to know that they're leaving a legacy of this for themselves and their family. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, this just makes sense.
Wow. So tell us about how is a grave marked, and how do you know is there a name on there? How do you find it? And isn't there some kind of GPS thing too? Or I think I read about that.
That's right. So the graves are marked in a couple different ways. The first is with a physical marker. It's a little aluminum disc. It's on a stake so it doesn't roll away or anything. And it's stamped with the name and dates of the person buried there. So there's always a physical marker so that when you go up to a grave, you know who's there.
Okay, so you can see a name and a date. Got it.
We also digitally collect GPS coordinates. that we make available on our website so that anybody can type in a loved one's name on their smartphone when they go to the preserve to visit.
Oh, wow, we are modern here.
Press the little button that says walk to site, and it'll open the GPS program on your phone and put a pin at the location of the grave so that you can walk right to it.
That is very impressive. Wow.
So those are the two standard ways that every grave is marked. Some people choose to get a native Tennessee stone engraved with the person's name and dates, but that's sort of an optional thing. Some people get it and some people don't.
Okay. All right. Wow. And let's say someone passes away, and I guess the body is delivered by an ambulance or something? How do you even deliver a body?
So most families will work with a funeral home, and there's a lot of good ones that are out there.
Okay.
Namely, they need a funeral home's most basic services: refrigeration, sanitary care, preparing the body for the burial, putting it into the shroud or casket that the family's chosen, and then transportation to the cemetery. We've worked with a lot of different funeral homes, and truthfully, any funeral home can help a family do a natural burial.
Okay. All right.
And so most often that's the case. However, it is legal in Tennessee to have what's called a home funeral, which is where there's no funeral home involvement at all, and the family and friends of the deceased do those same things.
They put it in the back of the car and just take it
It's
themselves.
a little bit more complicated than that,
Right.
but essentially that's the idea, right? They take care of their loved one at home, using dry ice or ice packs or a combination thereof. They'll do, washing the body and preparing it for the burial, and they'll transport the body themselves. It's certainly not for everybody, but I'll tell you the story of a gentleman that I worked with in Florida who was a local preacher, and his wife had cancer. And for years and years and years. And at every step in their journey, she was whisked away to a new doctor. And what he told us was that he felt like he couldn't help her at all. That, as her husband, he felt like he needed to do something and he couldn't. And so when we told him that a home funeral was an option, that he could finally take care of her, it was a relief. So again, it's not for everybody. Most people use a funeral home. It makes things a lot simpler, and gives the family room to do the things that they need to do to be able to grieve. But sometimes being the one to take care of their loved one is the way to do that.
So if, let's say it's the summertime and a family member has passed away and the body is delivered, then you do have to walk, the body has to be delivered out in the woods someplace, right? And then you have a procession there, or I guess you can make up whatever you want.
Right. So the idea of making up whatever you want is exactly the right idea. So we try to meet with the funeral directors a little bit early just to be able to get the body up to wherever the grave is going to be, because the terrain is, how do I say, present. There are topographical changes. We have some elevation changes over the property, and so it's really wonderful for families to be able to take a memorial hike, but not necessarily conducive to taking the body themselves up into the preserve.
Somebody has to get the body out in the...
So that's part of what we do.
Okay.
Our philosophy is that these are moments of healing and opportunities for healing. And so the way to do that is to participate. So we're there as guides, we're there as stewards, we're there to help, but we're only going to do work when called upon. We'll walk when the family arrives, we'll lead them in a memorial hike and procession up into the preserve to the gravesite. They'll have time to interact with the grave space and the casket or the shrouded body, to be able to be present and not have anything mediating, their experience and the death. and to be present with it. And then they're free to do whatever ceremony and sharing that they want to do. Some people bring religious leaders to do a service. Some people bring a picnic and have a little party. Some people are just quiet and reflective and tell stories. Again, there's no one right way to do any of this. It's about giving people the space to do what's right for them. And so we'll guide people through the lowering process. And they're the ones to lower their loved one's body into the grave.
Wow.
They're the ones to fill in the grave. We make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to take either a handful or shovelful of earth to put back ceremonially into the grave.
Wow.
And then we open it up to more active filling in. And sometimes we do a lot of that. Sometimes we're not allowed to touch the shovels.
Wow. Wow. Well, this is fascinating, and it's a wonderful thing that people don't even know about, and I know this program is going to be helpful. And then what is the website that people can get on?
Sure. So if you go to larkspurconservation.org, you'll arrive at our homepage. There's tour signups, information about what we do, ways to contact us. You can email us at info@larkspurconservation.org to set up planning sessions or ask questions. We're always more than happy to help however we can.
Okay. And then it's free to go and visit. And didn't you say there's certain times you can sign up to visit just to take a look? When is that?
Sure, absolutely. So the preserve is open 365 days a year for people to go be outside. But we do group tours and hikes of the preserve every second Saturday of the month for people who are interested and think that this might be something for them. And there's a sign-up list on the website that people can add themselves to so that we know who's coming.
Okay, on the second Saturday. And how far is it from Nashville?
It's about an hour from the center of downtown.
Okay, in Sumner County?
That's correct. It's almost in Westmoreland.
All close to Westmoreland.
That's correct.
And I'm sure is it marked as a park?
There's the entrance is a little bit nondescript. It's a gravel driveway with a boulder in front that has our name on it, and the emblem of the 3 larkspur flowers. But people can pull into the parking lot and go for a hike whenever they want to.
That's great. And it sounds like people who are like, I don't know what to do, I need guidance, you're there, and then there's another gentleman.
Right. Our executive director, John Christian Pfeiffer, who started Larkspur with a number of other people, Becca Stevens of Thistle Farms, was a founding member of our board. JC worked in the funeral industry for close to 15 years before he left to start Larkspur.
Well, this is great. Well, thank you very much for being our guest.
Me.
And that is Transitions, Body, Mind, Spirit.